Hello and welcome to this Lord of the Rings Rise to War video. I am Phipps, a good side player on roleplay server, and today I want to talk about Legolas, his design, his skills, what I recommend to run with him. So let's have a look at his respect item. As a respect item, he takes the Malern Leaf. You can see it is shared with Arwen. I have him currently at respect 10. How I got him so high is because he's the commander I like the most. So I put all my ale into Dwalin and all my other respect items into Legolas. I have been using Mathing Exchange a lot, so every single tier 3 respect item I got exchanged into Legolas right away. And also tier 2 respect items, I've been exchanging them into Legolas. This is how I got him so high up. And also gift pack selection, always use that for Legolas. So let's have a look at his classification as a commander. So Legolas gets classified as a warrior, which means he gets additional might, 2 additional skill points, and the most important part is his damage as a commander is increased by 10%. So from his classification, we see he is meant as a damage dealing commander, and we want to use damage dealing skills with him and not, for example, army buff skills, which would be used on a leader, but this is a warrior. So we can see he is meant to be run with damage dealing skills. For his base stats, we can see 90 might, 77 focus, and 82 speed. Now, how does that compare with other commanders? I listed all the warrior commanders on here from good side, and you can see the average down here. You see it's slightly below average on the might department, base might, on might per level for those that I have. He is also underperforming, but all the other stats are good. Now you can see a Hirgon, for example, is, you know, an odd dock here, very low base might, very low might per level, and very high speed and very high speed per level. So, you know, we could ask ourselves, is Hirgon is really a warrior if he is justly classified in that sense because of his stats that really, stand out in this table. Now, in all the commanders with all their stats on good side, you can see the medians here, and you can see in the base might department, Legolas is around, place 15 of all the commanders. So now we know Legolas is a warrior, so we want him to do damage as a commander. We want might and we want damage skills. Just as an example why it is important to look at, commanders classification and what they tell us about him. This is Gimli. His R3 skill is Durin's Blood with Whirlwind and All In, which does really good damage and is really useful on a damage dealing commander. So we see that Gimli, Dwalin, and Balin all have the same R3 skill tree. So we could ask ourselves on all of these 3 commanders, should we just max that because it does really good damage? So we look at their classification. We see Dwalin is a warrior, so he does more damage, 10% more damage. Uh, Gimli is a warrior too, but Balin is not a warrior, but he is a leader, which means he gets more units in his army, which means he is meant to be run more with army buff skills than damage dealing skills. Does not mean that he can't do damage as a commander himself, but just his classification, his units will not profit thereof. So we can see just from the classification, Dwalin and Gimli, we want damage dealing skills. Balin, we don't want damage dealing skills. So that is something just to show what classifications of commanders can actually tell us about how we should run them. So now I will go over the skills, every single one of Legolas' skills. If you already know them, of course, you can skip ahead. But so Legolas has Greenleaf, which deals damage against the lowest defense unit. He has Attack Vitals, which deals damage and has a chance of dealing an additional damage. And Mirkwood Ambush, which has Rush from the beginning, deals damage, physical damage or poison damage. Then we have some army buff skills here. Elves evade damage. Ranged units receive less damage, and ranged units deal more damage. Then we have damage dealing skills again. Elven Prince normal attacks have a chance to deal additional damage. Heartseeker deals damage to the enemy target with lowest HP, and Dual Blows gives a chance for Legolas to attack again each round, so to attack twice each round. And then we have Dwarf Friends melee units deal more damage. Friendly Relations, Elves and Dwarves receive less damage and then protect elves. Dwarves protect elves in the army. So this is an overview of all the maxed stats and which round they proc. So the first thing we notice is there is actually chance involved with this commander. So chance here, and chance here. Um, so that's something that stands out right away. So he is a risky commander in a sense of Dwalin and Gimli will perform the same every single fight, but Legolas, even if the same army against the same army again fights, his damage output numbers will be different every single fight because there is chance involved here. Something else we noticed that his R5 skill tree profits elves and dwarfs units, so those are the ones I will recommend. Something we noticed, there is the army buff 3 skill. Like I said, he is a commander, so he does not synergize with army buffs because of his classification, but to stay true to his classification, we wrote run, damage dealing skills, but just that this is an option to run him just as a, ranged unit modifier. I've seen it once against a fellowship member. This was an enemy Legolas who has been running, army buff skills with ranged elven units. Good. Then we have the damage dealing skills, which is true to his warrior classification. Now from those damage dealing skills, we see that Elven Prince and Dual Blows has a really good synergy because Elven Prince makes his normal attacks hurt more and Dual Blows makes him attack more. So they have a really good synergy, and if we can see it is his core, so we need Legolas R3 to actually have his core as a damage dealing commander. And if we ask ourselves which one of those, deals most damage, so I can max that first, I made a table for you with his damage output potential. So if there's chance involved, I used the max value, the max damage output. So you can see Dual Blows and Elven Prince together deals 6,000 or has the potential to deal 6,000% damage plus the 10 normal attacks additionally, which would deal damage by themselves. And then the other skills that also deal damage, you can see at the bottom how much damage output is possible with Legolas through his skills. You can compare that to other commanders like an Aragorn 2 has the potential to deal even more damage from his skills compared to Legolas. This is not even with Strider considered, which would, increase the might of his items that he gets to deal more damage. And, a Faramir, and you could, do the same thing for like Legolas, Dwalin and Gimli, and then you could ultimately compare which commander would actually dish out most damage. Just something fun to do. And you can see the skilling I have been running him with, so you can see all the damage dealing skills. Plus in his R5, if I have the points, 1 point into Elven Protection already gets all the Elven units protected by the Guardians, and then Friendly Relations makes my army more tanky, which is what we want because a more tanky army means our Legolas will stay in the fight longer and dish out more damage. So let's have a look at the items. I will not go over every single item there is in the game and which one fits him, but just in general, what we want is might for Legolas himself, damage. So if the item has an ability that deals damage by itself is also good. And we want, damage reduction for the army, stuff that makes the army more tanky. So those are the things we are looking for. I'll just show some items I have been running on him. So Mirkwood Bow gives might and speed to the commander, which is good, but more important here is the ability. Normal attacks have a chance to deal additional physical damage, and that's what we want because his core, like I already showed, is his normal attacks, and he even attacks twice each round probably, so this ability becomes very important. Another good item if we don't have that is Battle Axe because it gives so much might. Flay, he will, ignore target's defense, so it makes him deal more damage, but this becomes, less important if we already have Ram Riders in our army that reduce damage, defense, for example. Then as a armor, Scale Mail gives might, and as an ability gives might again. It also gives defense to melee units. Now, if your melee units already have high defense, then this becomes less valuable. So, for example, every item that gives plus HP or gives damage percent reduction becomes more valuable if the units already have high defense. Then Quilted Armor gives might and speed, plus you can see here percentage damage reduction for the tank front. Then Full Helm gives a lot of might, plus percentage damage decrease again. Hiflin accessories are more difficult because I have less available. They are rarer for me at least. You can see all the items are actually good strengthened because my other commanders all have blue gear because Legolas takes up all the purple gear I have. Um, so Hiflen gives might, and you can see HP for the army, and then some increase against evil units, and then you can see might and HP again. You can see 350 might, it's like 180 is out of the items around, and the Nergorn 2 would even, profit more from might items. To show his unique item, he gets might, and you can see chance again, true to his design, of activating a level of his skill. This, of course, will increase if we upgrade them, but it's harder to upgrade than a purple item I showed, and also, the purple mithril, I don't even have enough. I have 28 total on my whole account, right? So that's not enough to get it, and not enough to, refine it afterwards. So, yeah, that's not an option for me currently. So let's have a look at units I suggest running him. So there is a base composition I recommend. That's the Guardians. They have good HP, high defense, and 100 units per command. They are meant as the tank unit in the army. They additionally get shielding and burn damage reduction, and also a damage dealing skill. Now, I want to talk real quick as an input about this heat-proof skin that Guardians and Ram Riders received, and then there was, a big discussion, or I've seen reactions from evil side players on Discord, to be more specific, their accounts to be refunded. That's what I've seen. So let me talk real quick about this, about the countering concept. So in general, in this game, we want the same thing countering the same thing. So we want, if there is commanders that deal high physical damage, we want commanders that reduce their damage output. If you have commanders that heal, do a lot of healing, we want commanders that reduce that healing. So we always want, if we have a standard unit that does something, we want to counter it with a standard unit. So we want the same thing countering the same thing because of accessibility. So standard units are accessible to all players of that side. So everybody has them, but commanders, you need to get them first. And if somebody gets a commander that does something, the other side can get a commander that counters that thing, and that they should be of the same tier. Because of accessibility, right? If you have a neutral unit that does something, it should be countered by a neutral unit in general. And with countering, I don't, there is items, there shouldn't be items that give immunity to something, items that give madness immunity or stun immunity. That's not countering, that's hard shutting down a whole line of commander that depends on this mechanic. There should be no immunity on an item. It can't be that a single item shuts down a commander. It should be countering, which means an item could have, um, increases stun resistance of units by 25%, meaning, they are 25% less prone to stun or 25% less prone to madness, but not immunity. Immunity is hard shutting down commander designs. it's not useful in the game. It should be countering. So there should be no immunity. Um, Now about this whole thing, of course, that's black and white. If I say, accessible things should counter each other, it's a complex game, of course. There is overlaps. There's commanders that buff burn damage of units. This is why we have commanders that reduce burn damage received of their units. So with high alert, for example. So it's still commanders countering commanders. But now with the mechanisms, the problem here was, when I started the game, Evil Side had access to Madness as a unique mechanism and Burn Damage as a unique mechanisms, which I, as good side player, did not have access to. But I've seen we had more healing and more focus damage. Now the problem was, Evil actually had a standard unit that dealt that, unique mechanism. Not a unit that inflicts madness, those are the commanders, but a unit that deals burn damage. So to counter that out, good side would need a unit that is resistant, like I said here, that counters that standard unit countering a standard unit, that is less prone to burn damage. So this is why this update was actually a balancing act. Um, and now, to be fair, there's still a balancing act missing on the evil side because um, Evil had from the beginning a standard unit that dealt burst damage. Good side did not have from the beginning a standard unit that, dealt focus damage per auto attack or healed itself. And so we got a neutral unit now that deals focus damage with each auto attack. So Evil should have a neutral unit or get on one or two of their neutral units inherent focus damage reduction. And that would be a balancing act too. That's one that's still missing, I think. Um, and one of the suggestions would be to put on barrow weight inherent focus damage reduction because they have seemed, to me, they have been seen to be underperforming, and so inherent focus damage reduction would make them more valuable in the game. It's important that everything in the game stays valuable, right? Each chess piece on a chessboard should have their specific purpose and be viable for the whole game, play their part in it. So yes, that's just my thoughts on countering concept real quick. And on those changes, let's continue. The Ram Riders, they are a good tanky unit too, as the second unit in the core composition. They have mounted, they have burn damage reduction, plus trample, and that's now the important ability here. They reduce the defense of the enemy unit, which means our Legolas will dish out more damage, which is exactly the whole setup here and what we want. So with those two units, we can already compose whole armies. This is an example. Legolas is higher level against Testaro with Vanguards and Undead, and he performs pretty well with this army setup. Another example here, again lower level. His army setup again performs pretty good. And now we still have, that was the core composition. Now we still have a third unit we can put into there. So as the third unit, we could, what is dangerous to our units right now? It's poison damage or focus damage because they, go right through. But another danger would be high damage dealing units, and those high damage dealing units are mostly in the back line or ranged. Because they will just chip away at the health of our guardians round for round. So we can deal with that with Dunedains. You can see they get damage increase against ranged units, prioritize ranged units and receive less damage from them. So that would be a defensive army setup for the army to survive longer, for Legolas to deal damage. And you can see an example here. First you ran into a Gandalf the Grey with March Wardens, then into an Elrond with March Wardens, and then died to a Legolas with March Wardens. But of course this army setup will perform best against ranged army setups, so those Dunedains did work here. If you were wondering why that enemy Legolas dealt more damage than my Legolas, it's because he had a well-refined Elven Dirk with Pierce, while we only had our Battle Axe. Then another example is against same level alerts, but here we used cadafracts, which are good against, melee units. And to show again, the trolls taunted the Dunedains. This was to show that even against melee armies, it's an okay setup. Here against the full melee army setup, same level. With Dunedains, they died, but still the army as a composition performed well against full melee armies. Again, hard counter, I'm talking about, commanders countering commanders. And you see that commander here, that was a tile I ran into, and, my army performed pretty bad. Legolas did very little damage in comparison to what I was used to him doing. The enemy's burn damage units, of course, did a lot of burn damage because we did not have guardians. But the thing here is this skill, intimidation. So each round he gives the enemy commander less might. So each round the enemy commander will deal less physical damage, and also he can inflict stun. But this will counter all the high physical damage dealing commanders like Legolas, Dwalin, Gimli, Aragorn too. This is a hard counter, one commander that counters them all. And you can see here round 1, Legolas was stunned, so could not do any damage and already had minus 28 might. And then round 10, he gets reduced by 280 might. So it's like 50 might left. If he attacks, he does very little damage. So this is a hard counter, the commander countering the commander. So as a third unit, we can actually use a more offensive choice. So a unit that deals more damage himself, because in this case, previous case, that unit would have dealt all the damage basically. And one example would be Sentinels. They deal good damage. And are protected by Guardians if we put 1 point into the Elven protection ability. And you can see a Legolas against same level Dane, which is already hurt though, but performed really well. You can see the Sentinels dealing good damage. And in this example, it is more obvious. It's a lower level Eowyn against my Legolas. And in this example, you can see the Sentinels did 60k damage. So very good damage from a unit itself, and then you can see, of course, Legolas, the main damage dealer. Another example would be the Bow Knights. Now, the Bow Knights have tankier stats and mounted, but the thing is, since we have Elven protection, we don't really need more tank units. But what would be useful here is the giant slaying ability if we, encounter trolls. So that's what those Bow Knights could be useful for. Then just some units that would be usable. Again, they do not profit from his Legolas skill tree at all, since it's, elves and dwarves that profit from his skill tree. They are just a tank unit with mounted and full protection, and they have highest HP. So if more HP is needed. The Guard of the Tower are also a low cost unit in that sense. That got better since the recent buff that they receive less damage from cavalry. It's what I was talking about in my video countering Rohan, where I have not been using that anti-cavalry unit against cavalry at all because they always died to Theoden. So Guardians had higher defense, they were way tankier than those Guard of the Tower against those Theodens. But now the Guard of the Tower were made more tanky, so they actually survive longer and can not only deal damage back, but make the army more tanky. So they became more valuable now against cavalry as an actual anti-cavalry unit since that buff. And then, you could also use Iron Warriors if you are Erebor. And then something else I've seen is I do not have access to keepers, but I have seen an enemy running it. So you have my core set up here, and then the keepers deal focus damage with each normal attack, so they can also be viable as the damage dealing unit, again protected by the guardians. And I made, of the standard units I suggested, I made a table here so you can compare them for yourself. You see guardians and sentinels are among the lowest cost fastest conscripted units, which is very important since we need to reinforce a lot if we are fighting a lot, and then we need to conscript a lot. So you see Guard of the Tower are also in this category, which you can use if you do not run any, skill at all on Legolas that, profits elves and dwarven units. You can see Guardians also do good siege, so your attack Legolas will also be able to take care of forts, and they have high defense, so they are a really good main unit in that army. Then you can see Dunedain and Ram Riders actually have the same cost. So Dunedains, they die in the fights and are costlier than Sentinels. This is why Sentinels seem like the better choice here. And Ram Riders, are costlier, but their trample ability is really important. So we use less Ram Riders than we use of the lower cost, faster conscripted units. So we use mostly Guardians, then Sentinels, and then Ram Riders only like 800 because we also only want their trample ability. Then you can see Sentinels, way higher damage output than Bone Knights against, normal units if we're not talking large units. And then, cataphracts have really high HP. And yeah, that's just for you to decide which units you run. And that's also, I'm not saying I have the best builds. It's just, again, like in the countering for one, I'm just showing what has been working for me and what I have liked to run so far. You can, of course, experiment for yourself, try out things for yourself. It's the most fun part of this game. And yeah, that's my video. Thank you for watching.